But the point is, I think it's not the only part. But in order to understand the financial part, you have to have these unvarnished, naked truth, clear-eyed discussions about what are your financial needs? What are the debts that you're bringing into this relationship? How much will this relationship impact you financially? What is the value add? What is the value loss?
The content presented and discussed is purely intended to be general and educational in nature and should not be construed as specifically tailored investment, financial planning, tax, legal, psychological diagnosis, or other professional advice.
Hello, everybody. This is Manny Henson from Gamble Wealth Management with Dr. Abbey Durkin on the line with us. And we have another great podcast episode with you all. We're going to talk about a subject that is near and dear to some of the people I talk to. And I'm sure that Abbey has some people that she talks to that has some of these questions or concerns about this, but love later in life, and specifically for women, the implications of that. And Abby, when you think about like aging, I definitely understand, like there's obviously the biological that, assumption that women will outlive men and they have to plan around that. And there's certain decisions that women will make that men typically don't necessarily have to make all the time. That's not always the case, but what are some of the challenges of aging and, finding love, I guess, in your viewpoint?
Yeah. So I was really inspired by this article I read recently by Roxanne Roberts, and she's a writer at the Washington Post. And last week she published this article. It says, for older women with money, it's yes to love, but I don't to marriage. And this really captivated me because in her article, she spits some facts, and some of them are as follows. 22 million households in the USA have a net worth of $1 million or more, and a third of them are headed by women. And that's point one. Second point is that this is the first generation of women to accumulate a significant amount of wealth. So in the coming decade, women are going to hold greater economic power than in all previous generations. And part of the reason why older women is predominantly in this title is because this wealth has taken decades to accumulate, unless, of course, you're born into it. But for women who now have been economically, I don't want to say advantaged, we've been economically empowered, I guess, in ways, or we've had some significant obstacles removed over the past couple of decades in order for us to acquire this wealth. And it's had a really interesting impact on relationships. And this is more than just the prenup agreement that people talk about. This is what happens after you have accumulated wealth through 401k, through your savings, through your investments, and you find yourself single, or you've been single, and now you're contemplating getting into a relationship. And it's a totally different stage in life, because at this stage in life, when you have financial security, as one of the people in this article that she interviewed put it, is actually a medical resident who was interviewed. She and her colleague, these two residents, were marveling at the idea of being able to get married for love versus for financial stability. And when women are finding themselves in a position of financial stability, it can have really positive psychological impacts on the partners that they choose. Because when you take away some of the financial urge to find a person for that stability aspect, when you no longer have that pressing need, you can be more clear-eyed about who you're choosing and why you're choosing it. And so the relationship between finances and who you choose as a partner is really taking quite an interesting shape as you look at this population of women, I'd say 45 and plus, which I'm in. So I'm not trying to put shade on the older woman category. Like, I am right in there too. And I just thought that this was fascinating because one of the other great quotes was, you want to build your life with someone in order to live your life with someone. Each one of the people that was interviewed, they have somewhat differing financial strategies about how to approach money with their partner. But what I love is that everybody had a strategy. It wasn't the same way that we go about getting into relationships when we're young, which is we want to find that person, settle down, and get
Yeah.
stability. Once you have that monicum of stability, you make really different choices. And it was bringing up a lot in my mind about how when we are in that search in the very beginning of life, that there are a ton of incentives to getting married that aren't about the relationship itself. There's socio-cultural, religious, moral implications to this concept of you have a certain path in life and you have to go through this path in certain order, right? And so sometimes people will choose to opt into a relationship, even if it doesn't make any financial sense to them
Yeah.
at all, right? And other people will choose to opt into a relationship simply because it makes financial sense. And that's a big elephant in the room. And sometimes that's a taboo topic. But we can't ignore the aspects of the I guess the value add that another person brings in terms of financial stability. But it really was fascinating to me thinking about the different types of choices that we make as women as we're approaching relationships, but through that financial lens. And you mentioned some of the people that this might be near and dear to in your client base. And I was wondering if you could maybe talk about what you see as some of the pros and cons of
Mm.
marriage, financially speaking.
Oh, wow. That is a really big question there. And, as we were talking, I was thinking about, I have clients who, just fortunate enough to be in situations where they feel comfortable talking to me and, be honest. And I think for most of the people who are interested in marriage, it's about the companionship, right? It's about having somebody in the journey
Mm.
and going and sharing jokes, inside jokes, and funny
Mm-hmm.
moments, and time with watching a movie and maybe binge watching a show and saying you didn't watch it. It's just like
Yes,
it's just
yes.
it's about a whole bunch of other things that are not about the money. And when you're getting older, I think women get a little bit more or a lot more confident in themselves, and they understand what they want and what they don't want. I think that's also the same for both sexes. Going back, like in history, you gotta break down and understand the whole purpose of marriage as an institution, and a big reason why people got married. You're talking to hundreds of years ago. It's really about resources, right? Who gets what when someone passes away, right? If we didn't have marriage, there would be perhaps children in and outside of the main relationship that might have claims on property, assets, countries, the resources that are built between two individuals, primary individuals, and fratricide and kingdoms and different empires were within different empires wasn't unheard of. You look at the Greeks, you look at the Ottomans, you look at any of the major empires over the last hundreds of years, and you can see that, a lot of infighting and death. But, keeping it really, really simple, the stakes are a lot less eh, intimidating as an average person, the average couple this century. It's really about also, who takes care of your children, who has a right to different things. Benefits is a big part. And one of the main things that most people will talk to me about, if you're looking at second marriage and that sort of thing, is really alimony and social security. So let's say
Mm.
you're no longer married with someone you were married with. They're giving you some support between that period of time and that divorce to for a few more years. Is rarely ever, if any, like lifetime support, but anymore. But that having another marriage or relationship would impact that. If you have more than 10 years in a marriage from your prior spouse, your benefits, your calculation, your PI that's based on your earnings history is going to be based on the greater of your half of your ex-spouse's earnings history or your own, or your next spouse is. Now, most people don't know about that, the second part. They only assume that it's based on whichever was your last spouse or your current spouse, but you can change that. Especially if you're raising children, your earnings history was spotty and Social Security looks back 25 years. If you're an older woman, you might say hesitant, well, if I get married, how does this affect my Social Security? Social Security represents a replacement of 30 to 40% for most households. And then maybe even higher back again for women who were raising a family and doing a number of other things. So it's those are two main ones. It's really Social Security and alimony. There's some others, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
what jumps out in your mind from a psychological standpoint? What do you see as the biggest benefits? I've seen some statistics to say that women who are married who live less time, and women who are not married live longer. But
Yeah.
I wonder why you think why that might be the case too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly with women outliving men, women are the ones now that are having to have those inheritance conversations. And they're in those wealth management conversations as a result of their longevity in many cases. And, when you think about the reasons for people coupling up when they're younger, there are legitimate, practical financial reasons to do so, right? We've got education shared costs. We have health insurance, which is a huge one. You also can have the shared housing costs, which there's a big housing crisis right now. And so it makes a lot of sense just from a practical, pragmatic standpoint to pull your resources together. But it's a different kind of decision-making process when both people are coming from a place of financial stability. And just like we've seen stories about couples that, for example, they don't share the same bedroom, maybe because one partner has sleep apnea and snores really, really loud. We're seeing an increasing trend of people living quite happily with totally separate finances. And it isn't just a preventative measure, guarding against potential demise of the relationship, but it's in a way simplifying the relationship and actually making it healthier and more about the dynamic between two people being less complicated. When you remove the financial dependence between people, you can see them in a different light. And I think that might be the space that more older women are able to step into. And, we're talking about topics that are often taboo, right? Love and money. It doesn't get much more taboo than that. But we have to have these conversations. And I'm glad that they're happening in a public space like a podcast. Because if we do have young people listening, which I hope we do, having this kind of financial perspective is important, where finances, for most people, they are a big part of the equation when you're choosing a partner. But the point is, I think it's not the only part. But in order to understand the financial part, you have to have these unvarnished, naked truth, clear-eyed discussions about what are your financial needs? What are the debts that you're bringing into this relationship? How much will this relationship impact you financially? What is the value add? What is the value loss? And we talk about opportunity cost. If we forego if we forego a job offer, for example, in another state that's higher paying in favor of a relationship, that's an opportunity cost. And it's a financial discussion as much as it is an emotional discussion. And so I think, it's a good way of blending the psychology and financial worlds together. You don't get a better blend really than when you're talking about partnership, right?
Oh man, it's one of the most important decisions you're going to make in your life. You're spending so much time with this person. They have, legal rights. You're trying to build something. You're trying to raise family. And talking about that too is a lot of people who have children from another marriage.
Yep.
And they're confused about what would happen. And, there's some, maybe your adult children don't necessarily like or interested in growing another relationship with another step parent. There's always that factor. What most people aren't aware of is there's some, obviously there's some risk of disinheritance if you married someone and most remarry, but there are legal devices that can be created to protect them and continue to make sure that the reason why someone is staying with you is for happiness, companionship, and not the money itself, right? There's a thing called a marital trust where your second spouse could have the right to income during their lives, but the corpus or the remaining amount of money that's left after the second spouse passes away goes back to the children, whether that be the children of the marriage or the adult children from a prior marriage. And so, talking to estate planners, talking to an attorney, and telling them, being honest of what your concerns are really important. And I'm also thinking about that for people who are in existing relationships where they're not married,
Yep.
right? What happens if you pass away and you have children with a person you're not married to? And so, working with an estate planner, telling them like, this is what I want to happen in the case where I pass away. I'm in this new relationship. I don't want it to be about money, and also want my kids to not feel like this person's chasing after me, Casanova type of situation. There is a solution if people are willing and open to talk about it with someone. And confidentiality is a hallmark and a keystone of anything that I do. Like as a certified financial planner, if someone says something to me in confidence, that doesn't go anywhere else.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, it's probably not going to be an easy answer, but what do you think about splitting finances?
No, I think as an older couple, that's probably going to be if you have children from a prior relationship, it might be a consideration. Yeah, I do think that marital trust could be a good device to make sure that if you pass away, that your children from a prior relationship are taken care of. There's other consideration. People have businesses. Like, what happens to your business
Right.
if you pass away? Does your business partner want to be uh, a business partner with your spouse if you pass away? And most people would say what. And so that's where splitting things off makes sense. I do think that during your marriage, your second marriage, you're going to need to, and most states require, some level of support of your spouse. You don't want to have the law tell you that you have to support your
Yeah.
spouse, but there's some part that would be commingled to pay your bills, the household expenses. If you want to go beyond that, then you can separate finances. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think keeping things separate can cause more harm than good if you're not looking at tax planning completely and collectively. I can't believe how many people I've talked to who are like, because I also do taxes as well. I'm filing separate. And I'm like, okay, great. Okay. Is there a particular reason why you want to do that? Just so I understand. Oh no, they want to just do their taxes some other time, and I want to do mine now.
Wow.
This is the person you're married to. Like, you don't trust this person to know how much you make, or if that's legitimate. If that's something you get is it the real reason, then let's talk about that. But usually you lose more by not collaborating on a tax standpoint.
Raises a really good point too about maybe people not understanding the financial implications within within the context of the relationship, if they're making it for maybe not just an emotional reason but for a pure convenience reason. Then in
Yeah.
couples, usually you've got one person who's on time and one person who's the kind of like late, and when you've got one person that's like ready to go, and as soon as they have their tax documents, they're already on the platforms and they're filing. And then you've got the one person that is scrambling on April 14th, right? So you can see it within couples that, okay, from an organizational time management perspective, of course it would make sense to file separately, but there are these very real financial implications to doing that. And it kind of comes back to the communication aspect, where you got to
Yeah.
communicate with your partner about what you want to do, why you want to do it. But then I'm so glad that, in your example, that people did have that opportunity to have that conversation with you and you actually asked, what's the reason? Because if it just is a matter of convenience or timeliness, or I just want to be over and done with it, well, let's pump the brakes, because there's some real monetary implications to that, right?
Oh yeah, I mean it's dramatic. You look at the tax code, and you might have phase outs that are a dollar.
Mm-hmm.
If you file separately versus filing jointly. And so making sure that you marry somebody that you feel like you can be comfortable with talking about that. I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't want to talk about that, or how you
Yeah.
could be comfortable. Or, I mean, there's got to be other reasons as well.
I'm wondering also, from a financial perspective, what would make sense for couples to keep separate as far as finances go, if anything?
If you have a business perhaps that you're managing, and you're not necessarily need to, redo an operating agreement and add them as a co-owner, I think that might be something that has some reasoning behind it. I mean, your employees have help you build your business. It could be very politically untenable to have someone just step in and manage your business that you've created with another
Mm,
person, unless there's some clear understanding of what their value that they're bringing. And I mean, there's some problems with that. And then there's your normal fun money, right? So like I said, I think having a bucket of money that you use to manage your household expenses or mandatory expenses is great. And having your own money, don't lose yourself completely, and
mhm,
just having some money on the side that you can buy chip gifts for each other, and you can buy stuff for
mhm,
yourself, care of your own self.
mm.
That's important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm really glad that that's being talked about now, because some people go into marriage with a very all or nothing mindset. And
Hmm.
what we're finding out is that might not be the best way for everybody, right? Now, not one size fits all in relationships. And the same is true for those financial dynamics between people who are in relationship. So, for one person, it might be that they put everything in the same shared pile. For another couple, it
Hmm.
might be that they each have their own respective, as you say, like fun money and their self-care money, whatever they need to like get through on the day to day, kind of a personal allowance. And then maybe there's a
Yeah.
shared savings account. Maybe you guys would have individual savings account. Maybe it would make sense to separate it in terms of financial portfolio performance. If maybe one partner was more risk averse and another partner was more risk tolerant, you might see different financial strategies within the same married couple, right? Have you ever come across that, maybe where like one partner is more forward leaning in risk and investment and the other one wants to hold back?
Yeah, that's a big key part. I mean, key thing that I'm dealing with most couples is for those people who are, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s and up, there is a risk tolerance that each individual has on their money. And there's got to be a blending of those two. And so what I typically do is I help clients understand where both of they are individually, and then come to a consensus that's in between. Dollars are fungible. We're going to assume that if you're managing money, you're managing investments, that you both want to have investments that provide you an income and resources in your later years that you cannot outlive. No one has a crystal ball to see who that is. We understand what your cash flow needs, and I can simulate and show, all right, this is what you want to do. This is your third house, this is your vacation home when you're 60, you retire. Here's this time frame where your cash flow needs are going to change because you're leaving your main job and you're going to a part-time job, and you're doing all the things you wanted to do in your 30s and 40s because you have the money in your 60s, 70s, and 80s. But let's look at what your portfolios look like together with a blended approach of both your risk tolerances. And I have resources and solutions to do that. I also have a comprehensive, you've seen a little bit about it too, Abby, has that a comprehensive, like a psychological assessment to see how money is served in their versions of themselves in the past. How's that influenced their decisions in the past? And so there's this observation, and especially if they're engaged, I love to go through that first before they make a decision to kind of help them figure out, all right, where am I coming from when it comes to my relationship with money, the positives, the good, the bads, and the uglies, and vice versa. And where do we need to make a compromise? And where do we need to make some adjustments in ourselves? Because like you said, like there's people who are completely on top of things. Like they're really, really interested in planning in the future, because planning, regardless of how much money you have, by the way, planning helps you get to where you want to be, all else being equal, versus somebody who's just like laissez-faire and they're just like not really interested. It's like not really interested in having a conversation.
Yeah, I'm really glad that there's, resource like you that can demystify these financial concepts, and being able to talk, like with somebody like me, for example, about where are you at psychologically? What's your relationship with money historically been like? What are the taboos that, what are the things you don't want to talk about? And let's see if we can build up a safe place for you to express some of those concerns. Is it maybe culturally taboo to discuss private earnings? Like in Japan, for example, there's a little bit of a taboo in discussing monies earned or earnings earned through trading. So especially with the Mrs. Watanabe, which I want to talk about in our next episode, because that's another women in powerhouse situations on the financial spectrum. But being able to have those conversations in confidence about your perspectives on money, what you want, what you don't want, what it says about you, and that differs by the person. What are some of your internal obstacles when it comes to saving and spending? How do you think that'll impact your spouse? What are some best case scenarios? What are some worst case scenarios? What are you going to do to safeguard yourself psychologically and financially? And also prepare for success, because it's not a gloom and doom conversation. So, yeah. Awesome.
I hope that everybody who's listening just realizes that, look, as long as you're open and honest, you have a planner you can talk to, there is a solution for every potential challenge you might have with creating a new financial life and new life with another person. It's just a matter of having those conversations with an estate planner or financial planner, someone that understands a little bit about your situation that you're willing to talk to, and in estate planning, and they can come with a customized solution. That is it for us today. I wish you all a great week, and hopefully we hear from you or see you in our next, or listen to you. Let's just listen to us in our next podcast. All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
The content presented and discussed is purely intended to be general and educational in nature, and should not be construed as specifically tailored investment, financial planning, tax, legal, psychological diagnosis, or other professional advice. Any data cited is valid as of the date of presentation, but please know that such data are frequently subject to change. Any investment performance referenced is purely past performance, which is no guarantee of any future performance. Nothing contained in this course should be construed as an offer to sell, a solicitation of an offer to buy, or a recommendation of any security or other financial product or investment strategy. All investment, tax, and financial planning strategies involve risk that you should be prepared to bear. Investment, financial planning, tax, legal, and other professional advice is specific to each individual and entity.